You will not be able to stay home, brother. You will not be able to plug in, turn on, and cop out. You will not be able to lose yourself on Skag and skip out for beer during commercials because the revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be brought to you by Xerox in 4 parts without commercial interruptions.
Marching trying to show that they're like they represent Orlando or like they represent Florida. They don't.
Will not be televised, will not be televised, will not be televised. The revolution will be no rerun, brothers. The revolution will be live.
Grand Rising Free Thinkers, this is the TD9 Podcast. I'm your host, Ted. Of course, I got my boy Jay beside me.
All right, man. And today, we've got some heavy topics to unpack. Topics that are definitely going to make you think twice about who's in charge of your children's health and how much influence one billionaire can have. Now, we'll start by talking about a recent ruling in Vermont where school officials can vaccinate your children pretty much against your wishes, and you can't sue. And then we'll shift gears to talk about Bill Gates, who's been facing backlash for some controversial remarks about India and his involvement in global vaccine programs.
That's right, Jay. So let's get into it. First up, this Vermont ruling truly is eye-opening. Basically, the courts have paved the way for schools to vaccinate your children against your wishes, and you have no right to sue. Now let that sink in for a moment. The school board has deemed that this ruling allows for your children, the ones who lack the ability to fully understand the complexity of medical information, including, risks, benefits, and long-term consequences, to make medical decisions for themselves without your approval. And there is no legal recourse for you.
No, exactly, man, exactly. And that's actually crazy. We've been taught as parents that we're the ones who get to make decisions for our children because children are susceptible to external influences like peer pressure, the media, social media, and otherwise, which could lead them to prioritize like immediate desires over their long-term health. So when a school gets the power to override that, that's a huge red flag. And if something goes wrong with the vaccine and it affects your child in any negative way, you can't do anything about it. You can't even hold the school accountable.
Right. Medical decisions are complex and require a level judgment and foresight that children typically don't have, making adult oversight essential to ensure their well-being. It's not just about vaccines, though. It's about the precedent that it sets. If we let this happen, what other rights are we going to lose when it comes to, making decisions about our own children?
It seems to me like the state is trying to remind us about what's her name, Chris Erickson, right? Mm-hmm. The board president trustee of California, Area 5, right? Mm-hmm. The way she put it is,
while parents do have expansive rights, and they should, they don't own their children.
And unfortunately, news outlets like AP News are painting a very serious situation as just a misrepresentation by certain parents on social media, right? So the courts effectively shield schools from liability, meaning that even if a child is vaccinated without parental consent, whether intentional or unintentional, there's little recourse for parents. Now, while the ruling does not explicitly grant schools the authority to bypass parental consent, it does create a scenario where schools can act without facing legal consequences, which undermines parental rights in practice. You know what I'm saying? This is kind of a parallels with the law that's in California. What is it? Cal Prop 47, which has changed how some low-level, non-violent felonies, they changed them to misdemeanors, things like theft. So technically, stealing hasn't been legalized, but the lack of enforcement renders the law meaningless.
I come from the perspective of we need to fight for our communities. People are just coming in and taking what they want, and as long as it's less than $950 worth of items, it's not a felony.
The Land Park resident has seen many instances in person or on video.
This Target has the most retail theft of any Target in the region.
2014's Proposition 47 was designed to focus on violent and serious offenses and reduce prison overcrowding. But Duncan says the unintended consequences have caused retail theft to increase. Greg Totten, former Ventura District Attorney and now the CEO of California District Attorneys Association, is helping lead the measure, called the Homelessness, Drug Addiction, and Theft Reduction Act. If passed, Totten says it would hold repeat retail thieves accountable after 2 or more convictions, provide addiction or mental health services for people facing felony charges.
We're trying to restore accountability.
Similarly, like I was just saying, if schools face no accountability for unauthorized vaccinations, it creates a situation where even though it's not officially allowed, it might as well be because there's no accountability.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And then once that control is out of the hands of the parents and into the institutions, it's very hard to get that back. But that's enough on that topic. I'm gonna go ahead and let's switch gears, and we're gonna talk about Bill Gates. You know what I'm saying? Recently, he actually made some comments about India that have left people, kind of pretty much scratching their heads. He referred to their country as a laboratory for testing. Like, they're testing new health initiatives, and people are understandably upset.
India's an example of a country where, there's plenty of things that are difficult there. The health, nutrition, education is improving, and they're stable enough and generating their own government revenue enough that it's very likely that 20 years from now, people will be dramatically better off. And it's kind of a laboratory to try things that then, once you prove them out in India, you can take to other places. And so our biggest non-U.S. office for the foundation is in India. And then most number of pilot rollout things we're doing anywhere in the world are with partners in India.
Yeah, Jay, that is an alarming thing to say. To call an entire country a laboratory.
Right.
Oof. I don't think it's just a slip up. And especially for someone who is so deeply involved in the global health initiative, man, it doesn't look good, Bill. It raises questions about how these health policies are being carried out, especially in countries that don't always have the resources to push back.
No doubt. You know what I'm saying? But what makes it even more complicated is the context. If we look at Gates' track record with vaccines, we see that his foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, by the way, the polio vaccine program in Africa has been linked to a polio outbreak. So when Gates refers to India as a laboratory, it almost feels like he's saying, hey, we just tested new methods here. If they don't work well, just part of the experiment.
Exactly. It's disturbing, especially when you consider that polio cases in Africa were linked to the new oral vaccines that the Gates Foundation introduced.
Exactly.
And now you have this comment about, again, India being a laboratory. I cannot stress this enough. This does not look good.
And let's not forget that India itself has had a history of defending Bill Gates, especially when it comes to the polio vaccine.
Right. And while I can understand why India wanted to defend Bill Gates, it's a little ironic that they were so quick to defend him when the controversy was about Africa. Yet we had articles clearly outlining the issue with his foundation's vaccines in Africa. But now that the focus is on India itself, suddenly there's a change in tone. The same publication, India Today, is now calling out Gates' comments, which suggests they might be reconsidering their earlier stance on things.
I actually don't blame them for reassessing. It's one thing when we're talking about another country and another population, but when the focus shifts to your own country, it is different. You know what I'm saying? If you're going to defend someone who's deeply involved in health programs that have caused harm elsewhere, you have to ask yourself, what's the real cost of this defense?
Exactly. And I think India's shift in response to Gates' recent comments is a reflection of just that. When the issue comes to your own doorstep, you can't just brush it off. You have to wonder, How many other countries are blindly following these health policies without fully considering the consequences?
You know, and I want to stress to the people listening, this is not just some conspiracy theory. You know, this is real. This is happening right now. Gates' involvement in global health initiative is not without its flaws. You know, we've seen reports of failures like how an unqualified failure in vaccine policies led to thousands of kids being paralyzed. You know, there's articles about this. It's a serious topic that we need to look into. These policies that were supposed to help people have done more harm than good.
And then there's the matter of what Gates himself has said. He's on record talking about injecting, quote, genetically modified, end quote, substances into the veins of children. And no, that's not some science fiction plot. It's literally something he's discussed in public.
But we think that the Africans ought to get to decide which crops they grow in which ways and which seeds.
The strongest analogy is to medicines. And, you know, is there something to worry about with medicines? That is, might some of them have side effects? Do we need safety testing? I mean, and we're taking things that are, you know, genetically modified organisms, and we're injecting them in little kids' arms. We just shoot them right into the vein. So, yeah, I think maybe we should have a safety system where we, you know, do trials and test things out.
Exactly. And when you add all this up, the questionable policies, the unsettling comments, and the track record of vaccines leaked to outbreaks, it paints a picture that's hard to ignore. You know, Bill Gates may have done a lot of good in some areas, but he's also been at the center of some very serious controversies.
So what does that mean for us as individuals? Should we continue to place our trust in someone like Bill Gates? Or do we need to start asking, the tougher questions? Is he truly looking out for public health? Or is there something else driving his actions?
You know, that's the big question, Ted. I think it's up to us to keep asking those hard questions. And it's not about vilifying people, you know, but it's about holding them accountable, especially when it comes to something as important as the health of our children.
Nah, I could not agree more. So listeners, what do you think? Is Bill Gates the savior of, global health, or has he crossed the line? Let us know in the comments. And as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more in-depth discussions like this one.
Until next time, stay informed, stay skeptical, and always ask the tough questions. Thanks for tuning in.
I can't switch up standing for me. Saying trying to hold me back, I break the curse. Talk to God every day like favorite cousin. They know my name around town because I'm buzzing.